It has sometimes been called the Forgotten War. But during ceremonies commemorating the end of the Korean conflict 60 years ago, President Obama expressed the sentiments of a nation when he said, "No veterans should ever be forgotten." Hello, I'm Kathy Laren. On this edition of Focus, a look back at the Korean War and how it is being remembered today. Over 36,000 U.S. troops died during the three-year conflict. 100,000 others were wounded. Although the war ended over 60 years ago, only in recent years have the remains of almost 90 Korean War soldiers listed as MIA been identified. Our guest today has written a book about the conflict. It's entitled Forgotten Warriors. Welcome, author, lawyer, adjunct professor at UC Clermont College, historian Gary Knepp. Gary, thank you so much for being with us today.
Glad to be here.
Why do they call it the Forgotten War?
Well, I think quite frankly because it has been forgotten by the American public. And there are a number of reasons for that, I think. One of which is it ended in a stalemate, essentially, so there was no victory to cheer about. There was no loss to romanticize like the Confederates did after the Civil War. It has ended a stalemate and unresolved, and it's still technically at war today because it ended with an armistice. And it's a little hard to understand, at least from our perspective, why it had been forgotten, considering the fact that there were over 4 million casualties, both civilians and combatants, during just a 37-month war. So, and it's been called a number of different things, too, including a police action.
Yeah, I found that an interesting one.
Yeah, this came from President Roosevelt, or President Truman, and he was asked at a press conference about the war, and he said that we were just really trying to stop the bandits from North Korea. And I think he was trying to justify going in the war without actually a declaration. And so one of the newspaper reporters said, well, then I guess if they're taking care of bandits, this must be a police action. And he said, yeah, it's a police action. And I'm sure he had many times to regret that characterization. And you talk to the veterans today, and the usual response is, police action, hell, it was a war. And it certainly was.
Let's go back to the beginning. How did the United States get involved in the war?
This is also one of those interesting kinds of things, because I think most people didn't know where Korea was. And after the end of the war, of World War II, there were a lot of Japanese soldiers who had not been repatriated. And there was an agreement made between the United States and the Soviet Union that the northern part of the peninsula would be under the control of the Russians for a period of time, the south under the U.S. And they just drew this line at the 38th parallel using old National Geographic maps and just kind of drew it across. The idea was supposed to be temporary, but each side began to solidify its positions, and more it became a country. And when the North Koreans attacked in June of 1950, this was really not within the strategic interests of the United States. But you have to understand that the beginnings of the Cold War, the Soviets seemed to be on the march. Communist China was just formed in 1949. And I think it was more to show Western resolve that we're not going to allow the communists to advance any further. So they decided that we needed to draw that line in the sand, and so we got involved.
What was the sentiment at home during that time?
Well, again, most people didn't know where Korea was, and it was kind of like, geez. And even, you know, one of the stories the guys that I interviewed is a guy named Louis Lastly, who was in Japan at the time. He had a great time in Japan, as did most of them. And they were on maneuvers near Fuji, Mount Fuji, and they were certainly ordered to get on the train and head back to Tokyo. They had no clue about what was going on. And he said he was asking the Japanese outside the window, what's going on? And he said, finally found one of them that spoke English. He said, war. And he said, war? Where's the war? And they said, Korea. And he said he turned around to his buddy and looked at him and said, where the hell's Korea? Well, he found out soon enough, because he was directly on his way. But most of the people in the beginning really didn't pay a whole lot of attention. And it wasn't quite like the Vietnam War, but there was growing sentiment near the end that we needed to end this, and which eventually ended in the armistice.
And there was some concern this would end up being World War III.
There's very clearly. One of the things that was, we were totally unprepared for this. We drastically cut back our military after World War II. The budget was slashed. The futurists who were looking at the military situation felt that the atomic bomb had made ground war obsolete. So when we went to war, we were very unprepared. The battalions were under strength. They were undertrained. They had poor leaders. The weapons were obsolete. Many of them were used in World War II. And so when we went to the war, the first group of men was called Task Force Smith. The shells bounced off the tanks.
Great.
We didn't even think we needed tanks, much less shells that could penetrate the armor. One guy talked about using a bazooka and shot 22 times before he got them to throw a track. The M1 barrels were pitted. They couldn't shoot straight. Radios didn't work. So we threw these guys in here. It was almost criminal negligence to throw our soldiers in at that situation. And we were beaten very badly in the early days. And we were just retreating further and further down the peninsula. And finally there was a stand, a do-or-die stand at the Pusan perimeter. And they were able to hold. And then, of course, MacArthur came back with Incheon, and they drove them out of South Korea. But it was a very bad time for the U.S. Army.
I know I've read this somewhere, that it was a lot like trench warfare in Korea, pretty much like it was in World War I?
Yes, near the end part of the war. What had happened is that once the Chinese intervened, which is a story all in itself, very slowly we fought back up the peninsula, retook Seoul, and established our line just north of the 38th parallel. And there it turned into a stalemate, into trench warfare. Very similar to what was going on in World War I, small unit patrols at night, fighting over meaningless hills that really had no significant value. And even so, nearly 40% of our casualties were sustained during this trench warfare period.
We're going to go back and talk about some of those critical battles in a moment, but what was it that compelled you to write this book?
A couple of things. Primarily, it was my father, Bill Knepp. Bill was a Korean War veteran, and like many Korean War veterans, they didn't talk much about it. It was as if when they came home that there was this vault, that they put all their wartime experiences deep into this vault, slammed the door shut, and got on with their lives. So with the timing coming, with the 60th anniversary, I thought that it's about time that these guys get their stories told. They're mid-80s and perhaps older, and some of them have passed. And in fact, two people that I interviewed have passed since I started this book. But of all our military men, I thought that they needed to have their stories told because we've just forgotten them. And that's what compelled me to write this book. What
was that process like? I mean, you yourself talked about the fact your own father didn't really talk about it much. How were you able to get them to open up and get those stories?
Well, I think most of them realized that it's time. It is time to talk about it. And people were, because of this armistice period from 1950 up until 1953, or when the war was actually fought, that this might be the time to discuss it with their advancing ages. There were still many that were hesitant to talk about some instances. My father said, there's some things I want, and that happened, I'm not going to tell you about. Others said, as I was taking notes, they said, put your pen down and I'll tell you this, but I don't want it to go in your book. So there's still things that are unresolved in their minds, but it's certainly an honor to be able to listen to these guys' stories as they were relating them to me.
Over what period of time did you work on this book?
This took about 3 years.
3 years.
And it has the stories of 39 men from 8 states who were involved, including I purchased 2 lots of letters on Amazon and excerpted the letters to be put in so that you get a feel from the timely, the contemporaneous thoughts of these guys as they were writing home.
Share with us some of those reflections.
From listening to all these guys, there's some common themes that came out. One of which was, and almost all of them, including those who were awarded for valor, said, we're not the heroes. The heroes are the ones who didn't come home. And are really, what they would like for you to refer to them as having a duty and that they did their duty. And that's all that's all the recognition that they want, is that they were called upon and they did what their country asked of them. And I think that's really the least that we can give to these guys from what they've done, and especially since their sacrifices, their accomplishments have been forgotten by most Americans. They also talked about, at the time, they didn't know why they were there. Perhaps we didn't tell the story or give the narrative for them to understand it. Some of them still question, was it worth it? Was it worth all the death of their buddies? But most of them take a look now at the comparison between South Korea and North Korea. South Korea is the 13th world's largest economy. It's a blossoming democracy. North Korea is a basket case. People are starving. And now I think that contrast, they understand what they fought for.
I can't imagine being out there on the battle lines and not having any idea really why you were there.
No. And a lot of times they didn't know where they were. They fought at night. Some of them were moving back and forth through the regiments. There's one regiment, the 27th, was known as the Fire Brigade. And during the Battle of Pusan, whenever there appeared to be a breach, they would be moving at night, daytime, and you talk to them and said, I can't give you dates. I can't tell you where I was at a particular, I can give you an idea of where I was, but I don't know, because they were just, that's just the way the war was fought.
We've heard in the media, we've seen movies, Heartbreak Ridge, Pork Chop Hill. Did any of these gentlemen, were they involved in any of these conflicts? And if so, what were their experiences?
The ones who were involved in the static warfare, my father and his friend Joe Hertz, who's also listed in there, and several others, said that probably the most realistic depiction of the war that they were in, and they realized that they were in a different war than they were in the beginning, was the Gregory Peck movie Pork Chop Hill. And they said you could tell the type of combat that was going on, the idea that they were fighting probably over this meaningless hill that had no significance in the final story. As a matter of fact, Pork Chop Hill is in the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. Neither North Korea or South Korea own it. So that's, again, that's kind of an underlying story of somewhat of the futility and the unresolved nature of this war.
What surprised you the most throughout talking to these men and sharing their stories?
I had some inkling of what the war was about, but there was so much I didn't know. I teach history. I didn't do the research prior to this. I learned a lot about just really how mismanaged this war was, how badly we started in it, how intelligence failures with the Chinese intervention. You know, there's Chinese diplomats were telling the United States through back channels, don't go into North Korea or we're going to get involved. That was denied. Was just said that it was just talk. We had soldiers, and Harry Falk was one who was talking about, he was up there near the Yalu River and he was calling on the field phone saying, hey, there's Chinese all over the place. He finally got to a colonel, he said, and they said, quit calling, there are no Chinese here. MacArthur's attitude was that, hey, if the Chinese even come in, they're so primitive that it wouldn't be a problem. And of course there was a disaster afterwards on the Chongchong River in Chosin for our failures to listen. And I think that's one of the things that surprised me, and really how neglected the Army was treated at that point, or the military.
Share with us a little bit about what that did for you and your relationship with your own dad to be able to have that kind of a conversation about what he experienced so many years ago.
It was very important for both of us, I think, to share that information. My father, and you know him, has been involved in the community in many, many different projects through the 60 years, and I always wondered what was the motivating factor? Why would he do this? And oftentimes he did it at his own financial setbacks. He lost money because he was busy doing it. Why would you be that committed? So he finally told me the story of Paul Bradley, and I think that is what has motivated him. They were on a nighttime patrol. Paul was his radio man and was right behind him. My dad was on the point. And when they got up to this hill, they saw shadows popping up. Suddenly, small arms fire. My dad was pushed and got out of the way. And they decided to retreat because they were so outnumbered that they got back to the lines, and then they realized Paul wasn't there. And they looked around, they couldn't see Paul. And they gave him a glass, glasses, and my dad looked up, and on the top of the hill where they were that night before, Paul was there stretched out with his arms like this. And so he went up there to get him. They were afraid that the body was booby-trapped like the North Koreans typically did. So he got a roll of camo wire, tied the wire around the ankles, and he and another guy strung the wire out and pulled it in case it did explode. And he finally got Paul's body and brought him back. But he believes that Paul took a bullet meant for him. And I think, like other men, survivors of war, this is one of the ways that they cope with this situation, is that they feel like he sacrificed for me, so I have to give something back to the community. And as a result of all the efforts that he has done, including the memorial and many other things in the community, the Ohio Military Hall of Fame has inducted him for his commitments after he left the military. It's long, that organization also has people like Ulysses S. Grant, John Glenn, and many other Ohioans.
Quite impressive.
Famous. So the state recognized him for all those years of effort, and I think really that's where it began, was with so that Paul's life meant something.
And we definitely need to segue a little bit into this. You mentioned the monument.
Mm-hmm.
Your dad and several other Korean War veterans actually have worked together to build a monument to their fallen comrades in Miami Township. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. As we were approaching the 60th anniversary, my dad and I were starting to talk about this situation and felt like we needed something to recognize those efforts. And one of the things was to write the book. We got proclamations from the county. I taught a course on the Korean War at UC as part of this. But the idea came up for the memorial. And so he got together two other Korean War vets, R.J. Villardo, who is now deceased, and Robert Sterling. And they began raising money. They talked to Miami Township government, and they allocated 8 acres. And from that, the Spirit of 76 Park was formed. And in addition to the Korean Memorial, which we'll talk about in just a second, he has a trail of the colonies, an Eagle Scout project that has a boulder representing each one of the colonies and was founded with a tree there in honor of those colonies. He also has the Trail of the Freedoms, which has important documents from Ohio and U.S. history, including Lincoln's second inaugural, the 10 Amendments to the Constitution, Bill of Rights, all those kinds of things on granite benches that the school children of Milford raised the money to do, and it the words of those documents are lasered on it. But the keystone was then the memorial. We wanted to make sure that this is a memorial that was interactive and educational. It wasn't just a thing there and nobody understood what it was. So the memorial is designed to appear to be a mountain, because many of the battles were fought in the mountains. Beneath the mountain, which is depicted with rocks, is the soil. And in the groundbreaking ceremony, my dad was able to obtain some soil from Korea. And they put the soil in vials, and each one of the Korean war vets who were there took the soil and then mixed it to make it sacred. And the capstone is a depiction of a bunker that he built in September of 1952.
He actually has a picture of this bunker.
He has a picture of the bunker, and amazingly, it was lasered from a very small photograph to this large 4-foot bunker. On the reverse side of the bunker are the casualty figures for each one of the units that were there, including, as you mentioned, the troops coming home. There's still 7,900 Americans missing in action in Korea.
That is amazing, that number.
Right, and some of them are depicted, the remains are depicted, but one of them, Louis Muda, we believe, is depicted as X656, because the Army refuses to do a DNA test to determine for sure if that's that man. It's an amazing situation.
Oh. What has been the reaction of the vets when they enter the Spirit of 76 Park?
Well, most people, including vets, enter it and they take a reverential attitude. They realize what it means. We haven't had the kind of reaction the Vietnam vets were giving tokens, but you can tell that they're quiet. They observe what's going on. They read the storyboards that we have placed on next to the trail so that you can understand what happened in the war. And many of them, we had several hundred people for the dedication, and they were all just extremely proud.
You mentioned earlier about the armistice. What exactly does the armistice mean?
An armistice means a cessation of hostilities. It means we're stopped fighting on this certain time and this certain date. There is no peace treaty. So essentially, we are still at war 60 years later on the Korean Peninsula. And since that 60-year period, and I have a chapter in the book interviewing men from Clermont, that have been in Korea since 1953, we've had nearly 700 men killed in action against the North Koreans during that period of time. And those men are certainly forgotten. We don't,
no kidding.
Almost 700 that died. We have several major incidents. And every once in a while, the North Koreans start popping up with some new feigned crisis to get attention. And we still have 28,500 American troops in South Korea today.
It's so interesting because we talk about the forgotten war. It's almost like the forgotten troops that are stationed over there.
Yeah, certainly.
You never hear anything about them.
And of course, we had the Pueblo incident in 1968 when one of our ships, it was a spy ship, it was in international waters, was captured. Our men were held hostage.
That's right.
One was killed in battle. Kind of a funny, sad story about that. They got together, and when they had these propaganda pictures taken, they all decided to flip the bird at the cameraman. And when the North Koreans asked them what that meant, they said it was a Hawaiian good luck sign.
Oh my goodness.
So they thought they got away with one until Time magazine wrote an article about what they were doing. And when the North Koreans found out about that, they were beaten for a week and starved.
My goodness.
So those POWs were very similar to the POW situation that the U.S. had, and it was a unique situation from an American standpoint with our POWs. Nearly, according to some figures, nearly 60% mortality rate, which is even higher than Andersonville.
Wow.
They were deliberately starved. They weren't given medical treatment. They were indoctrinated with communist propaganda. When they came home, the Army counterintelligence interrogated each one that came home to determine whether or not they had turned into the Manchurian Candidate, which is depicted in that movie in '62.
Right.
So there's so many aspects of this whole conflict that are very interesting and different than anything else we'd ever experienced.
There's one picture you have, Gary, it's a group of service members. I believe your dad is in that picture.
Yes.
And it's interesting to see the different ethnic groups that are involved in that conflict that are pictured together. You didn't see a lot of that back at that time period.
No, until 1947, the American Army was still segregated. Mm-hmm. President Truman signed an executive order integrating the military, but Korea was the first time that it had actually been integrated. There was, one of the stories I have in here from Tut Lambert, who was a former principal at Milford High School, was the only white member in an entire black regiment, company. So, even though they were beginning, it wasn't totally integrated. They were segregated to a certain extent. But that picture, I think, depicts the beginnings of the integrated Army, and those 4 men there, including my dad, went out on a nighttime patrol. And my dad said clearly that there were some racial tensions that were in the camps, particularly the reserve camps, but he said once you got out on the line, you weren't Puerto Rican anymore, you weren't African American, you were Americans, and you had each other's backs against the common enemy. So those kinds of exigencies will make things, give you a different perspective on life.
What's the takeaway you want people to have after they read the book, Forgotten Warriors, after they hear the stories, after they go to the monuments?
My takeaway, I hope that they get from this that these were composed of men. They were Americans. They fought the war. They did their duty and under very difficult conditions. Sometimes the temperatures went up to 100 degrees in the summer, 90 degrees humidity. They fought in the mountains, or they slogged through stinking rice paddies during the summer. In the winter, especially on the Chosin Reservoir and out west, temperatures dropped to 30, 40, 50, and even one occasion 60 below zero. And they fought an enemy that was sometimes as much as 10 to 1 against them. Just to know that, and to reflect that those guys did their duty, and that's what they would like you to know. They'd like you to know what they did, that they did their duty. They're not asking for anything more than just recognition of what they did.
I think also that brings up another important point. If you have a loved one in your family who may be a Korean War veteran, how important is it to get them to tell their story?
I think this is absolutely imperative. When I taught my class in the Korean War at UC Clermont, every person who took that class was related to someone who fought in the war. And I asked them, why are you taking this? They said, they didn't tell me. My grandfather, my uncle, nobody ever spoke about this war to me, and I thought it was an important part of their life. I want to know more about it so I can understand them. Mm-hmm. And when I teach the classes where it's appropriate, I try to get them to interview their relatives and put them into perspective into their history so that they understand, because I think it's important for everybody to know about what their fathers or grandfathers did during the war, or grandmothers at that point.
Lessons learned from Korea?
I think the most important lesson is we can never be unprepared. We have to be ready at a moment's notice when we go in, because what we did during that period of time and how we attempted to defend our national interest was a shame. It was shameful, and that we shouldn't put our men into those positions again. Make sure they have what they need to fight, and when it's necessary, sometimes we have to do it.
We're to all our Korean vets, thank you so much for everything that you've done in your sacrifice. Forgotten Warriors is the book. Gary Knepp, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you. I really love having the opportunity to talk about these guys.
For additional information about Gary Knepp, you may visit his personal website at GaryKnepp.com. To watch this and other Focus episodes again on demand, you can do so at our website, cettconnect.org/focus. Thank you for watching. I'm Kathy Laren. We'll see you next time right here on Focus.
Tell us what you think about the programs we air, or let us know if you would like to see a particular topic on Focus. There are several ways you can contact us. You can send your comments by email to focus@cettconnect.org. You can call us at 513-345-6522. Or you can write to us at Focus, care of Andrew Dahman, 1223 Central Parkway, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45214. Any use or rebroadcast of this copyrighted program or portions thereof is prohibited without the expressed written approval of CET.